President, let me inform you, Honorable President. It was on April the 25th, 2023, that we were informed by the Minister in the Ministry of Finance that Proman, having refused the offer because they wanted to renegotiate prices, Clico, that is, decided, Mr. President, to turn to the government. 36% that they had to sell. The total shareholding Clico has in Methanol Holdings International Limited, which I'll refer to as MHIL, was 56.53%. 36% was for sale, and 20%, 19.99%, was held by Clico in accordance with the Insurance Act. The question here, Mr. President, is this. We were told by the Minister in the Ministry of Finance that Corporation Sol was approached by Clico to buy the 36% of MHIL shares because the Proman Group refused or did not take up the offer. So Corporation Sol took up 19%, and NIF, the National Investment Fund, took up 17%. So 19 plus 17 is 36%. They signed purchase and sale agreement. They signed shareholders agreement. They signed valuation agreement. Everything was signed. Mr. President, I was shocked on Christmas when everybody is having a good time. Proman and the government met in secret with Clico, and the headline in the Trinidad Guardian on Wednesday, December the 27th, government to sell MHIL shares to Proman. And so when I read this thing carefully, I said, is this real? But how come the minister in the Ministry of Finance came here and told us those shares were purchased by Corporation Sol, were purchased by NIF, and the only thing that was outstanding was the updating the share register. So how come on Christmas Day, the government of Trinidad and Tobago sold not 36%, Mr. President, but 56.53%. Now, this is a company that is extremely rich. They operate out of Oman. They have a 30-year contract for natural gas supply. Every ton of methanol that is produced, the Oman government take it. So it is a rich enterprise. Why would a government want to dispose of 56.53% shares of Clico? And remember, government owns 49% of Clico. But government went ahead, Mr. President, and they did that. The question here is this. There's a valuation problem. When this thing was valued in 2020, the 56.53% shares was valued at $2.6 billion. TT, Mr. President, and this one, anyway, I'll talk about that before I conclude. And 2.6 billion, they never conducted a proper valuation on a Claire Gomez Miller. Since that woman came on the compound in 2018, a qualified opinion from KPMG, or KPMG, right? 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Before that, Mr. President, everything hunky-dory. But once this executive chairman came on the scene Everything was qualified. Mr. President, you know what they did? They hired their friend, or I shouldn't say their friend. They hired somebody called Charles Rivers and Associates. I went into the Clico report that came to this Parliament for the last quarter of last year. No mention of Charles Rivers and Associates. Who did the valuation for this company to be sold? Who did Clico hire, Mr. President? We don't know. We haven't seen the report. So, you know what happened? They conducted an in-house valuation. And you know what happened? Because nowhere in that report is Charles Rivers mentioned. They mentioned it only in this Parliament when the minister addressed us. That's the only time we hear about Charles Rivers and Associate. You go to the notes, Charles Rivers not here. You go to the Auditor General, the Auditor Statement, his name, you go to the report, not there. So, where's Charles Rivers and Associate? Mr. President, here was the rub. You know what the fellas valued the assets in 2022 at, Mr. President? 2.2. So in 2019 it was 2.6. In 2020 it was 2.6. In 2021 it was 2.6. But come 2022, the value of Clico shares went down from 2.6 to 2.2. A difference of $323 million. Where are money gone? Who take that money? We want answers, Mr. President. The government of Trinidad and Tobago has to account for this discrepancy. The Prime Minister has to account. The Minister of Finance has to account. Because I want to tell you something about this Minister of Finance. This Minister of Finance, Mr. President, I have to give him credit for one thing. He stuck to his guns. He wanted a NIF 2. He's on public record as saying that Methanol Holdings International Limited will form the basis of his NIF 2. But there was something going on that he had no control over. And the next thing you know, Mr. President, Switzerland come to Port of Spain at the diplomatic center. Switzerland. And then Trinidad and Tobago went to Switzerland. And the next thing we know, Mr. President, is that our asset that is worth $2.6 billion is sold for $2.2 billion, a difference of $323 million. And you telling me I have to pay property tax? And you can't account for $323 million? Mr. President, what is even more hurtful? This is our unconfirmed report, which I can't show you. Up to now, as we speak, Clico, silent. The Prime Minister, silent. The Minister of Finance, silent. Mr. President, the Governor of the Central Bank is silent. So Trinidad and Tobago, the people of this country, don't know what is going on. So I have to bring on behalf of the people and the party this matter so that we can get clarification from the minister. There could be a possible, plausible reason why the government chose to sell the entire 56.53% shares of Clico in MHIL to the Proman Group. But the government has a lot of questions to answer, Mr. President. Did the government, when the minister came here and addressed us, Mr. President, in April, did the minister deliberately and calculatedly mislead us? Because he's on record, Mr. President, as saying that this thing has been agreed to. They have purchased the Corporation Sol. So how Corporation Sol could purchase in April of 2023 and on Christmas Day, Proman, get all. How could that be possible, Mr. President? Mr. President, I am doing my research, and I'm coming up with some damning evidence. I am giving the government an opportunity today to clear the air before we take this thing further. But, Mr. President, all is not well. All is not well. The Prime Minister has to answer. The Minister of Finance has to answer. The Central Bank Governor has to answer. And this woman, when I see this woman, I'm going to withdraw that. The Executive Chairman, the former Executive Chairman, has to answer. Claire Gomez-Miller. Mr. President, let me tell you something in closing. You know, when you looked at the 2019 report, they slip into the report. The auditor is asking for the techniques used to determine the valuation. And you know what they are told by the Executive Chairman and Clico management? A contempt of court order is in effect. And they cannot show the techniques to the auditors. Mr. President, I went through the books of Clico for the court order, the number of the court order. Mr. President, I can't get it, I can't see it. And then the minister comes here in the Ministry of Finance and says this is under appeal by the Court of Appeal. I look for it, Mr. President, I can't find it. So where is this court order? Where is this Court of Appeal that this thing is under? Mr. President, this is wrong one, and we are asking for clarification. The minister is in the best position to clarify the issues for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I might have got it all wrong, and I'm seeking clarification. I am making no accusation at this time. I am making no accusations at this time.
Senator, you have 2 more minutes.
I am making no accusations. All I'm asking is for the minister to explain the following. What happened to Corporation Soul? 19%. What happened to NIF? 17% shares. How come it flipped? How come Proman come and buy all on Christmas Eve? Who conducted the valuation of those shares, Mr. President? Which company did it? In the past, Mr. President, it was Phelps, something on Phelps, I forget the name of the company that the central bank hired. But Mr. President, when this valuation was conducted, Clico was under the supervision of the governor of the central bank. And under 44DF of the Central Bank Act, you cannot dispose of any asset belonging to Clico without having an independent valuation conducted. And that must be a public document that you and I can see and have access to, or at least they will report to us, Mr. President. We haven't seen anything. So all I'm asking the Honorable Minister to do for us today is to clear the air. Let us know what has happened. Just like Lisa Agard come and say she wasn't responsible. Let the minister come and say, I was not responsible, and that happened behind my back. So let us get this thing clear. Because, Mr. President, I am telling you, this is the smoke. Fire coming. Thank you.
Minister of Finance.
Mr. President, I have never heard a more convoluted, incoherent, rambling work of fiction, as I just heard. There is no part of the contribution of the Honourable Senator that is accurate or relevant. So let me deal with the facts now. I can't respond to what he said because nothing he said was truthful or accurate. The fact of the matter is that Clico, Colonial Life Insurance Company, is owned 49% by the government, 51% by the liquidator of CL Financial. Therefore, the government is not the majority shareholder of Clico. Therefore, the shares in question do not belong to the government. The decision to dispose of the shares was a decision of the shareholder. shareholders, plural. The liquidator could have sold them without the government's consent. But there is a relationship of respect between the liquidator and the government with respect to important decisions. It is the business of the liquidator to try and recover the 30 billion, 30 and counting, that the government has put into the Clico bailout, as it is commonly called, which also included the bailout of many CLF subsidiaries, because Clico is simply one of the CL financial subsidiaries that were bailed out by the government. Other subsidiaries, for example, are British American Insurance, where the government put $1.6 billion into that company to bail it out, among many others. It is the job of the liquidator to liquidate the assets of CL Financial, which include the 51% of Colonial Life, to repay that $30 billion that the government is owed. Clico on its own, within that $30 billion, owed the government $18 billion. Clico, up to December, had paid the government $17 billion. There was just about $1.1 billion left to be paid. Clico had been trying for probably 15 years or 10 years to dispose of the MHIL shares as part of its obligation to repay the government the money injected into the Clico bailout. This is something that has been going on for a long time. It predated this administration. It predated the 2015 administration. And in fact, it began under the 2010 to 2015 administration, an attempt to sell the shares in MHIL in order to pay back the government the billions of dollars of taxpayers' money injected into the Clico bailout. The problem has always been there is a clause in the shareholders' agreement between Colonial Life and a company called Consolidated Energy, CEL, a typical clause, in typical commercial clause, where if the shares are to be sold, they have to be first offered to the other shareholder. And if that shareholder refuses, then the shares can be sold on the open market. That's standard corporate governance, not just in Trinidad and Tobago, but around the world. Usually in companies, there is this type of shareholders agreement. On all previous occasions, when Colonial Life offered the shares to Consolidated Energy at an independent valuation price, because there have been several independent valuations done over the years, including the most recent one. And on every occasion that Colonial Life offered the shares to the other shareholder in accordance with the shareholders' agreement, Consolidated Energy declined to pay the price. So whether it's $300 million US or $350 million US, which is the numbers that have been in the system for the last 12 years, I would say, Consolidated Energy said, no, we can't pay that price. The next step after that occurs, because Clico offers the shares to Consolidated Energy, which is the other shareholder in this company, in MHIL, and a month has to elapse, and then Consolidated Energy would say, yes, we're buying the shares at the valuation price. No, we are not. So on every occasion, they said, no, we are not paying that price for these shares. The next element in the shareholders' agreement kicked in, a very unique shareholders' agreement composed by the former owners of CL Financial. Don't need to call their names, everybody knows who they are. Very unique clause that you can sell them on the open market, but you can't sell them to a competitor. Now, who else would want to buy shares in a methanol company than somebody involved in the business of methanol? So it was very clever of the former owners of CL Financial to put that in, so that when CEL said, look, we don't want them, It was impossible to sell them. So this just went on and on for years and years and years. There were in fact 3 attempts. On the last occasion, after multiple legal opinions from senior counsel and so on, an opinion was rendered that, look, you could try to sell them to the government and to NIF. As soon as that was done, the lawyers for Consolidated Energy immediately sent pre-action protocol and said, if you try to complete that transaction, we will go to court and we will ask for injunctive relief. The last transaction was never completed. There was no consideration paid. There was no payment made. It was in abeyance. Sometime around September, October, November, CEL came forward and said, look, all right, we're now ready to buy the shares at the valuation price, which is what they had refused to do for 12 years. As a result, the shareholders' agreement kicked in, and they have paid $2.4 billion for the shares. That's it.